I'm Adam.
And I'm Sugar.
And this is Where There's a Williams, There's a Way. Hey, Sugar, have you ever had something vanish into thin air?
Let me tell you about the time when I was enjoying a nice chilly ice bath. I had this favorite fish-shaped ice cube toy I was playing with, and I let it on the ice shelf next to me. But when I looked away and then back, it was gone.
That sounds fishy to me. Do you think it melted into the icy depths? Or maybe another bear friend wanted to borrow it for their swim?
Maybe it dove into the depths seeking icy adventures of its own. I couldn't be too mad, though, considering it was surrounded by ice anyway.
In today's book, a teacher goes missing, and it doesn't take long for her class to really start to wish she was back. Let's get started. Ms. Nelson is Missing by Harry Allard, illustrated by James Marshall. The kids in room 207 were misbehaving again. Spitballs stuck to the ceiling. Paper planes whizzed through the air. They were the worst behaved class in the whole school. "Now settle down," said Miss Nelson in a sweet voice. But the class would not settle down. They whispered and giggled. They squirmed and made faces. They were even rude during story hour. And they always refused to do their lessons. "Something will have to be done," said Ms. Nelson. The next morning, Ms. Nelson did not come to school. "Wow," yelled the kids. "Now we can really act up." They began to make more spitballs and paper planes. "Today, let's be just terrible," they said. "Not so fast," hissed an unpleasant voice. A woman in an ugly black dress stood before them. "I'm your new teacher, Miss Viola Swamp." And she rapped the desk with a ruler. "Where's Miss Nelson?" asked the kids. "Never mind that," snapped Miss Swamp. "Open those arithmetic books." Ms. Nelson's kids did as they were told.
Remember the time you had a class pet, the little hamster?
Hammy the hamster. I was telling my students all about responsibility, and right in the middle of my lesson, Hammy decided it was a perfect time for an escape mission. The little guy darted out of his cage and vanished into the classroom.
Hammy must have thought he was starring in a rodent version of Mission Impossible. I can imagine the suspense as the students tried to catch him. Maybe he wanted to do some educational exploring on his own.
I wouldn't be surprised. It was like he was teaching us a lesson on his own furry way. You know, Sugar, it's funny how things can disappear when we least expect it. It keeps life interesting and full of surprises. They could see that Ms. Swamp was a real witch. She meant business. Right away, she put them to work. And she loaded them down with homework. "We'll have no story hour today," said Miss Swamp. "Keep your mouth shut," said Miss Swamp. "Sit perfectly still," said Miss Swamp. "And if you misbehave, you'll be sorry," said Miss Swamp. The kids in room 207 had never worked so hard. Days went by, and there was no sign of Ms. Nelson. The kids missed Ms. Nelson. "Maybe we should try to find her," they said. Some of them went to the police. Detective McSmog was assigned to the case. He listened to their story. He scratched his chin. He said.
I think Miss Nelson is missing."
Detective McSmog would not be much help. Other kids went to Ms. Nelson's house. The shades were tightly drawn, and no one answered the door. In fact, the only person they did see was the wicked Miss Viola Swamp coming up the street. "If she sees us, she'll give us more homework." They got away just in time.
One time when I was a kid, I had a really mean substitute teacher, Mrs. Bull.
What'd she do?
I remember how they glare at us with those frosty stares as if they were trying to freeze us with their gaze alone.
So she gave you the stink eye?
Yeah, And let's not forget the way she handed out assignments. It was like she was giving us chunks of glacier to carry home. I guessed they thought we needed some extra weight training.
Sounds like a real snowstopper.
She was kind of a flake. You know, like snowflake.
Despite the frosty exterior, I bet that substitute teacher secretly liked your class. Maybe they were just trying to teach you a life lesson about resilience and facing cold challenges head on. Maybe something terrible happened to Ms. Nelson. Maybe she was gobbled up by a shark, said one of the kids, but that didn't seem likely. Maybe Miss Nelson went to Mars, said another kid, but that didn't seem likely either. I know, exclaimed one know-it-all. Maybe Miss Nelson's car was carried off by a swarm of angry butterflies. But that was the least likely of all. The kids in room 207 became very discouraged. It seemed that Ms. Nelson was never coming back, and they would be stuck with Miss Viola Swamp forever. They heard footsteps in the hall. Here comes the witch, they whispered. Hello, children, someone said in a sweet voice. It was Miss Nelson. Did you miss me? She asked. We certainly did, cried all the kids. Where were you? That's my little secret, said Ms. Nelson. How about a story hour? Oh, yes, cried the kids. Ms. Nelson noticed that during story hour, no one was rude or silly. What brought about this lovely change? She asked. That's our little secret, said the kids. Back home, Ms. Nelson took off her coat and hung it in the closet, right next to an ugly black dress. When it was time for bed, she sang a little song. I'll never tell, she said to herself with a smile. P.S. Detective McSmog is working on a new case. He's now looking for Ms. Viola Swamp.
I've got several problems with this teacher.
Like what?
She's showing signs of having dissociative identity disorder.
Like multiple identities?
She certainly seems to go a long way to prove a point to her students.
I don't agree with being intentionally mean to the kids.
Sure, the kids missed her, but did she really do anything to change how they were acting or treating her?
One of the hardest things to do is to learn classroom management skills.
What do you mean?
If you aren't addressing problems or sending them to the office or having a principal always dealing with the challenging kids, you're handing over your power.
What power?
The power of respect. It's nice to have kids like you, but it's paramount to have them respect you. Then you can run your class effectively.
It seems like so much work to put in a costume, put on a show, and lie to your students.
For real, I think the real lesson is just to be nice to each other. And if you like this video, you don't have to lie. Just give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I'm Adam.
And I'm Sugar.
And this is Where There's a Williams, There's a Way. Did you know there's an estimated 50,000 search and rescue missions in the U.S. each year, and 40% occur in national parks? Day trippers are especially vulnerable when lost because they're often traveling without layers, shelter, and food.